So, hi everyone, welcome. I'm Rachel Rose from Workshop Muse, and this is our next installment of The Artful Soul, inspiration and big ideas for healing, reflection, and learning through the arts. The Artful Soul was totally born out of my desire to connect with people who I see working in the other side of the arts, working on the side of the arts that I care deeply and passionate about, people that want us to go deeper in our arts, bring our full selves to show up. And I am so excited today because I'm talking to Dr. Nancy Hillis. Nancy, when I emailed you, I said I'm doing a secret, like, hooray dance in the background because, yay, we're talking to you, which is so wonderful. So welcome, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I was so excited when you reached out to me, and I just love the idea of having these just immediate kind of ad hoc conversations, and just let's see where it goes.
Yeah, Nancy and I were just saying before we turned it on, we're like, we're going to trust the process and we're going to role model that because we have nothing planned and we're just going to see what happens with our conversation. So before we get too far though, Nancy, I do want to introduce you formally for people who don't know you. So this is Dr. Nancy Hillis, and she's an abstract artist, which we can see one of her beautiful pieces in the background. And she's an author, and she's a Stanford trained existential psychiatrist. The work of her life is to guide artists and creatives to believe in themselves. She fosters the creative process and gives artists and creatives the psychological tools to nourish their creativity. Wow, love that. Love the fusion of your training and your background and your purpose. What greater thing could we want to do with our lives, hey?
Yeah. Well, I've been fascinated with creativity, my whole life, and somehow, it kind of came together with art and psychiatry. Just, looking at what is it about. And to me, it's really about stepping into the unknown. So that is really what excites me about, working on an abstract painting or giving a workshop or sitting in session with someone in psychotherapy, is allowing, yourself to show up, not know what's going to happen, and then be surprised by what bubbles up.
Right. Kind of like what we're doing in a really safe way here, right?
Yeah.
Not planning, stepping into the unknown. And so when I asked Nancy what she wanted to talk about, that's what she wanted to talk about, is stepping into the unknown. And I can see how in your psychotherapy practice that you probably were encountering that all the time, people feeling scared and showing up and kind of not knowing what's going to happen, and that trepidation, hey?
Yes, because oftentimes what would happen is someone would show up and say, I was driving over here and I don't have a list of what I'm going to talk about. I didn't even think about it, or, I'm so busy or whatever. And I've often said, great, because actually this is fantastic for you not to know what you're going to talk about, because then we can just see what shows up for you today. And, oftentimes that's where the meaty, juicy, really kind of wondrous material is.
Yeah. And I think I heard you say too, like, we use like similar metaphor where it's like whatever needs to bubble up will bubble up. And so for me, sometimes when I go into like an open-ended process like that, like sometimes you've got some structure and you're going to guide people in a direction, or you maybe have an intention that you want, but then you'll kind of be blindsided and something else will pop up, and I'll have people be like, oh, Rachel, I know you didn't want, we're supposed to be exploring this and this happened. And I'm like, no, that's the bubble that needed to burst for you, right? It's all kind of sitting there, and whatever needs to pop for you today is going to pop for you. And we have to honor that, right?
That's right. And it's often, everyone's had this experience where you're going on a walk or you're in the shower or you're driving and something comes through when you're not trying to make it come through, when you're not strategizing around it. And yes, you may have like one little nugget, one little kernel of idea of something you're thinking about, but then something else comes in from the other area that just completely surprises you.
Right. And so that's the abstract piece for you, right? Like with your beautiful abstract pieces, right? So do you go in with like a nugget or an idea or?
So it varies. So sometimes there will be a nugget or a constraint. The constraint might be maybe I dreamed about continuous line, and I was like, oh, I want to explore continuous line, but I don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And so then you kind of work in a series and then allow each piece to talk to the other. And there's this concept called the adjacent possible that came out of evolutionary biology. And it's kind of like the idea that, you take one step and then that step opens up the next step and the next possibility and the next possibility, but you don't know what that is ahead of time.
Right.
And so, yeah, so it's like there might be a little bit of a constraint. I'm going to just do a white painting or, like that kind of thing. And then the constraint, however, opens up infinite possibilities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
can see, like, I was picturing like a little, like a little chain that you're building kind of as you go, right? Where like one piece and then the next piece and then the next piece. And what came to mind too is like in my own creative practice, that's what I think about too, is like for your life, which I don't know how we can see those two as separate, but like, you make a decision in your life and you're like, is this the right decision? Should I do this? Should I go here? Or, I want to do this, and you start, but you have no idea where those are going to lead. Right. And so the thing that I think is so beautiful about what you're doing or exploring is like how, I always talk about how you're building a muscle in your creative practice that then you're using in your real life, right? And it's like, that's the test ground, right? It's so you're going to that scary blank canvas and you're like, I'm going to start with the first thing and I'm going to see what the second thing is, right? And then when you're in your real life and you're like, I don't know what's happening, then you can remind yourself, you've got a muscle somewhere tweaking that's like, hold on, we've done this before. And it turned out magic, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I really see, I talk about painting is a mirror, or art is a mirror. It mirrors our lives. It mirrors our state.
Yeah.
And it's a back and forth conversation that we bring into our lives and back into our art, back and forth in this dance. And I love what you said there about, kind of like you face that blank canvas and you're kind of allowing yourself to take the next step and the next step and the next step and not knowing where it's going to go. And yet you bring that into your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, it's like, I always have to be careful, and maybe you are used to talking about this too, but it's like, there's nothing wrong with like sitting down with the intention to like sketch something lifelike, right? Or like a flower, or building a skill around it too, right? But I think that there's like an edge all the time where there needs to be like what you're talking about, stepping into the unknown, like the surrender piece, right? Where because otherwise we get stuck and we don't even see what step 2, 3, 4, and 5 can be, right? Do you find people get stuck there?
Yes. Right. And I've done, representational drawing and painting and, and I know, yeah, when you were saying that, I think that even as we're developing that skill, we want to allow for the magical to come through, for something new to emerge. And that's where I think if we're repeating ourselves, oftentimes that can happen because we had a really great drawing or painting and we want to keep creating these great drawings and paintings, and then you kind of get stuck on kind of repeating that cycle. And I think that we need to keep inviting the unknown in and allowing for, that ugly drawing or ugly painting, because that's the nascent embryonic forms of new work that's trying to emerge. And you might love that ugly painting down the road, or you might not. But I think it's really vital to, in this process of continually evolving as an artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And I think too, it's like, there's almost like, I don't want to say like arrogance, but it's like, sometimes it's because when you're talking about something coming through you, right? Like, to me, that's the soul side of things, right? It's like, we're cooking a pretty big stew here and I don't even know all the ingredients involved, right? Like there's so much that we don't even understand. And we all know when you just talked about something breaking through or coming through, it's like, well, where is that even coming from? Right. We don't even know. And then it comes through. And so, right. But if we're holding on too tight, I used to have a friend who used to tell me when we were working together, he'd say, I live in Canada, right? So he's using a hockey metaphor and he'd say, Rachel, you're gripping the stick too hard. You're gripping the stick. You need to loosen up. But it's like, I think about how many of us are gripping our paintbrush too hard or our pencil too hard. And we can't just like let mistakes happen or not mistakes, but just let it go, right? Just let it go.
Yes. Well, that's so interesting when you're saying about the hockey stick, because I also play cello,
Hmm.
and my teacher would say, "You're gripping the bow too tightly." You know,
Right.
it's like trying too hard.
Yeah.
We're trying too hard, and really, I believe that the magic happens when you get out of the way and
Yeah.
you allow, you know. And also, this kind of reminds me in a way of childbirth, of like getting out of the way and allowing this process to
Yeah.
come through you.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny you say that because I just was connecting with a student in one of my classes and we were talking about how I said, like, I used like the metaphor of like a midwife, right? I was just talking about how she needs support. I was like, you need like a midwife to help birth this work, bring it into the world with like gentle, loving hands, give it time, be with the pain of it, be with the uncertainty of it. Like
Yes.
you, and it was so funny. She emailed me back and she was like, oh my God, my daughter just finished her training being a midwife and she's the most compassionate person I know. Of course she's the person who needs to support me, right? And I was like, yes, right? Like it was such a, like I was using it as a metaphor, but she was like, oh, I do actually know a midwife who could probably like birth these creations for me and hold my hand through the process, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's like it came through, just like you had no idea that that was going to be so meaningful for her, that imagery and that idea.
Right, right. But the coming through piece, right, is like so I'm just going to put myself in the seat of people because there's going to be a lot of people who are listening to this conversation and they're going to say, I what am I supposed to do if I'm not supposed to try hard, right? Like I don't know how to do anything but try, right? So like what support do you offer people who don't know how to not try?
Yeah, and that's a good one. I get that because I'm one of those persons who is very used to trying hard, on stuff, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, and that's at first challenging, but I think my approach is to say, there's a method to my madness here. What I really try to do is help people to open up the gesture, and by that too, it's experimentation.
Mhm.
Open up exploration, playfulness, and experimentation, where you're really going in there, allowing, and you're even saying, I'm going to go in and create that ugly painting. I'm going to go in and do that ugly exploratory work. And I'm just allowing, and I'm believing you when you're telling me that there's value in this, because a lot of me is saying, oh, no, no, no. The perfectionist is saying, no,
Yeah.
I need to do it correctly. I need to have all this knowledge. I need to try harder. And really, so a lot of the work is asserting that the magic is not in trying harder, but it's in many ways it's about opening up the creative channels and, in a way, getting out of the way and allowing the unknown to come through, and that's where the magic is, and that's where we want to be, is experimenting continually and continually evolving the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the word permission kept coming to mind,
Yeah,
right? Like, which is why I think working with intention is so
yeah.
important, right? That if you show up and you give yourself permission to make the ugliest thing on earth, or to just explore one thing and like everything else is secondary, but today I'm just going to explore line or whatever, and it's like permission just to play, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I don't know how. Why it's funny. I was just thinking about this today because I've got 3 little kids, and they, we read about play and how important it is, and like they have to play, and then somewhere along the way we are like, no, I need to show up and I need to have structure and purpose, and I better do it right, and there's no permission for us just to go in and be like, I'm going to push this thing around and just see what it does when I push it, right? Like we lose that, and that permission to go back and have the intention to play is huge.
Absolutely. And you just reminded me, when you were talking about your 3 children, about the magic of watching children. And it's like, it's all there. They don't question what they're doing.
No.
They are in that place of absolute experimentation and play and exploration. And that's what we're trying to refine. And that's what we do. And then eventually, in this method to the madness kind of approach is, yes, we will start to bring in some considerations, some constraint, some look at structure, some concepts around intuitive composition, some concepts around value. And, we'll bring in these considerations, but we're not going to be ruled by them. Or stopped, because we don't want the strategic mind running the show.
Right. Because it will. They will just
yes,
show
it will.
up. It will. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. What I see as artists, we do all these things, we learn all these techniques, we learn all these methods, we get better and better and better technically, and all of these things. And then what happens ultimately is we want that freedom. We want to open it up. We really do want to experiment and explore, but then we say, I don't know how, because I've been so perfectionistic and so caught up in technique. And so this is what we're trying to do, is kind of open it up and refine that playfulness that's in you inherently.
Yeah, totally. And it's inherently in you. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Right? It's like,
yes.
You might be lost and you maybe haven't touched it in a while, but it's inherently in you. And, in my field, in the expressive arts, that's one of the byproducts, I think, of like, if you're a visual artist, like writing or using movement or something, right? Is it's like, oh, I'm a visual artist, so this other stuff is just kind of other stuff, but it kind of tricks you into like silencing that part of your strategic self and having kind of different entry points in other ways. And I'm just having this vision of, on your website, you've got all this beautiful pieces where you're painting and you've got these super long paint brushes moving your body, right? Like it's like a whole, it's like a full embodied experience, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm fascinated by the intersection of the arts. And for example, one of my friends in Australia said, Nancy, it's like, I can see how you play the cello, right? Because there's like that kind of lyrical.
Yeah.
Right. But, and I'm also fascinated by dance and choreography, by improvisational theater, by writing and writers and, creative writing, symphonic music, composing, like all the intersections. There's this exercise I do with clay that translates to the canvas or the paper, and it's about, I call it the 6 maquettes exercise, where it's like maquettes are little studies, and it's about the concept that you have your own signature, your own lexicon, your own gestural expression that threads through what you do. And so I'm really interested in continually exploring movement, gestural expression, improv,
And like, so the idea that your signature like shows up in the clay as though, and it's like threaded through to all of your other, interesting.
Yeah. And when I was working years ago in clay and realizing this, like Henry Moore did all these maquettes for his large works, monumental works. So these little studies. And I love that idea of the little studies, the maquettes. And then realizing that there is this movement that you have. And I also learned that in improv theater, we have these certain kinds of gestures we tend to have. And in action theater, you try to kind of open that up and bring in some more repertoire around that. But I also think that the canvas reflects too your state. So it's like your gesture, but also the state that you're in psychologically.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Even just yesterday, I did a little, I was like mad. I was like in a bad place. And I was like, and I went down and I was like, and I found, like, it's interesting when you start to pay attention and when you can let go, because I could feel it in my body and the way I was moving. And I was lucky because it's not often when you're mad when you can sit down and create, right? And so I was like, I kind of got to get this out. And I shared a photo of it on Instagram, and this woman was like, oh, I can see your feeling in there. And I was like, yeah, isn't it like, like, isn't it crazy that you could look at something and you could be like, I think this feeling, or whether it's right or wrong, but it's like imbued in the piece, right? It's like, I mean, coming through and like going into another dimension almost, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, I think you can make incredible paintings when you're angry. And we do a lot of work on that kind of the vocabulary of mark making and how different lines can express different states, and how everybody's got their different ways of expressing these different states, like serene or lyrical or agitated.
Welcoming ourselves into this practice, right? Which is why I wanted to talk to you, is because you don't have to check yourself at the door when you come in. Like, your work and your process is about who are you as like a spirit and a human being, and and how can this practice, this creative practice, how can they inform each other, right?
Yes. I like that when you did that back and forth, back and forth.
Hmm.
And it's just this ongoing evolution.
Yeah. I don't know how it could be any other way, Nancy.
Right.
When I see other work or I see other people's, it's like whether you want to name it or not, that's what's happening, right? And so it's been interesting for me to do this process of finding people to talk to too, because I had like one condition where I was like, I only want to speak with people who I feel like in their world are embracing this back and forth and do this. And it was harder to find than I thought it was. It was really hard to find. Not that people aren't doing it, but they're not owning it, maybe, right? They're not like sharing it. That's not part of they're not sharing. And I think that what I find the more I talk to people, especially artists, is people are saying like, oh no, that's actually totally what's happening with me, right? But it's not, we haven't. So I'm happy, I'm so thankful that you're here to kind of help create space and hold space for that coming into the unknown for us, right? Yeah.
Well, this is such a creative process. What you're doing here, kind of putting this together, these conversations, interactions, and kind of working with that constraint of, wanting to work with people or talk to people in this series, that are kind of doing this back and forth. And then there's that infinite possibility within that constraint.
Yeah, right.
So that's really cool.
Yeah. So Nancy, before we wrap up here, just tell us like what I did your beautiful, you have a free course that's online and you've got lots of beautiful supports, but like what else, if people are like really interested in your work or something that you're talking about, like how can they find you? What are you offering?
So you can find me at nancyhillis.com. That's my website. And then I have a book out, as you mentioned, The Artist Journey. Bold Strokes to Spark Creativity, and that really kind of gets into what we're talking about here, which is kind of the inner journey of creating, and how the inner journey affects the outer journey.
Yeah.
And that the kind of language that you have with yourself, really matters. How you relate to yourself and how that is reflected in your art. So that would be a great way to go. Yes, I've got all kinds of free offerings as well. I've got a free 7-day email course. I've got a webinar happening right now, different things. And then I have courses as well, and you can find them on my website. So
yeah, and we'll have links out to all of Nancy's stuff too. And Nancy, I just saw that you were doing an in-person retreat too. And
yes.
Like, one day when my kids are bigger, I'm going to come do that.
I would love that. I would love that, Rachel, because that I haven't done a retreat in about 3 years in terms of live. I've been running online programs, and I've been writing different things. But that just came up, and I'm super excited because it's at this really cool place in California near Santa Cruz where I live. And it's this space that's very kind of transformational. They're very much about yoga and meditation and mindfulness, and so it just feels wonderful there. So
you know what's going to happen for you? You're going to go there and you're going to have all this face-to-face interaction, and then you're going to have all this inspiration, and you'll have to go write another book for us.
That's right.
The back and forth, informing life, back and forth.
It's
awesome.
True.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to have this chat and just going into it. I'm really love there's a couple of little things I'm gonna have to go like look up and learn more and do some more journaling around that you shared. So thanks so much, Nancy. And I'm everybody, there's links to go check out her stuff and learn more from Nancy. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate it and really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, lots of fun. Okay, we'll see you later.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.